Hello there, people of the internet. How's everybody doing today? I'm doing alright, thanks for asking. Today I'm out here with a rifle that I never really thought that I'd get my hands on, just because I have so many other ones, but in this particular case I saw this at my local gun store and they had it there at a fairly decent price, and it's sitting for a year. It was there on consignment, and I talked to the guy selling it, talked him down to an even fairer price, and I walked away with it. This right here is the M91/24. This is obviously a Finnish rifle. For anyone who knows anything about Finnish rifle, there's some very clear calling cards on this thing. The astute among you have noticed that there's no rear sight on this thing, but that's fine. I should still be able to make hits on targets even though the rear sight is gone. Alright, now, where do we begin with this rifle right here? I've already stuck some rounds through it, I've already taken it apart, I've already checked it out, I've made sure it's, you know, safe, functionally capable. The rifling in it is actually quite nice. We're gonna go ahead and start off from the very beginning. Finland had ties to Imperial Russia. And Imperial Russia obviously no longer was a thing. It got overtaken by communists. That's whenever communist Russia came to be. And the Finnish had a bunch of these 1891 pattern Mosin Nagants in their inventory, and they did a couple of little upgrades to more closely match what it was that they were looking for. I can't really show you on the sights, but they cut the sights out to where they were measured out to like 200 or 150 meters. Versus the 300 Arshins that the Russians were using at the time. They, on the very side right here, marked down the actual measurements on the sight itself versus trying to like actually cut out actual measurements. They just went ahead and remarked the sights for the amount of meters that the distance would roughly translate into. Besides some sight adjustments, they also added on these actual swivels on the slings right here versus just having the holes for the dog collars that the Russians were using. That being said, this is still an 1891 pattern. It is quite long. Let's see, during World War II, or actually right at the start of World War II, the Russians took some land from the Finnish, and this sparked off the Winter War. The Finnish eventually lost and gave Russia the land. And then not long after that came the Continuation War, where the Finnish tried taking back some land from Russia, and they teamed up with the Germans to go ahead and try and pull this off. And this was known as the Continuation War. The Finnish, of course, lost that conflict again, as did the Germans, as we all know from history. This rifle right here is dated 1943, so it was smack dab in the middle of the Continuation War that this rifle was made. Well, that this rifle was refurbished by the Finnish. This rifle was an 1891 pattern, which was originally a Russian rifle. All the Finnish Mosin Nagants were built off of Russian rifles. They were not tooled up to make their own Mosins. But I imagine this rifle right here sat in Finnish inventory for quite a long time, and then the Finnish probably saw, you know, a batch of 1891 rifles and were like, hey, guess what? We still have some of those. Let's go ahead and rig those up and get them ready for battle. Because this is dated 1943. I was under the impression that these 91/24 models were refurbished in the, you know, 1920s. But apparently they continue to do it all the way out through the Continuation War. This is during the production time that the M39 would have been around. So this right here had to have been some sort of, maybe it was a second refurbishment of these rifles, or maybe they had a batch that they had just, you know, happened to come across. I'm sure there's some sort of explanation as to why this 1943 dated M91 was converted during the Continuation War, or maybe it was just refurbished. Maybe it was converted at an earlier point in time and then refurbished again during the Continuation War. I'm very doubtful that it saw frontline service, just because it is in half-decent shape. Including the rifling and the barrel. If this had actual sights on it, I think it would be a tremendously accurate rifle. However, it is accurate enough. I can make shots out to about 100 yards with this thing. I've already tried it. Just by using the little humps back here that you would normally screw your bolts in for the leaf sight were it there. Just by using that, I can make shots on targets pretty accurately. Now this rifle in particular is marked Tikakoski. It's got the little T with a triangle and a circle around it. It does have the SA Finnish Army mark on it. I do not believe that it was a Civil Guard rifle, but I could be wrong on that. I just don't see any of the Civil Guard anything on it. Upon disassembly of this rifle, I looked in the under tang on the back of the receiver right here to see if I can try and figure out the year and maker of the actual receiver of this rifle, but I could find absolutely nothing on it. So there's a lot of things that I don't know about this rifle. I do know one thing for sure though. The Finnish are known to make the triggers better on these old Russian rifles. They were known to, well, the Finnish were significantly outnumbered by the Russians, so they had to make their shots count. They had to focus more on marksmanship more than they did on the actual numbers that they had going up against the Russians. If you think about the logic behind it, it does make sense. If you have one guy taking on 10 guys, that one guy has to take out those 10 guys, so he has to be a better shot than those 10 guys. Mosins are notorious for having awful, awful triggers, but the Finnish went through and made the triggers supposedly much, much better on these rifles. However, on this particular 1891, and I mean this rifle could be, you know, 140 plus years old at this point. But on this particular Mosin, the trigger is absolute garbage. Like, I've dealt with some bad Mosin triggers, but this one, by far, takes the cake. Now, that being said, upon looking at the internals of this rifle, it looks like the trigger was replaced at one point or another, because it's made of a different alloy. It is possible that at one point or another this Mosin had taken some damage, and during the refurbishment in the 1943 process, which is why it's, you know, dated 1943, maybe the trigger needed replaced or something, and that's why it is of a different non-blued alloy. The sear and whatnot is just in the white, and that's probably why the trigger on this thing is absolute trash. Now, that being said, this is still the first 1891 that I've ever owned, and the first Finnish Mosin that I ever owned. I do intend to get myself some actual rear sights, so this right here is just a temporary solution, using some Kentucky windage to go ahead and try and make shots on target. And I mean, for the most part, just I know where to aim for this thing, so it works out well. It's not exactly a sniper rifle without the sights on it, but it is more than adequate for that poor bowling pin, for some backyard plinking. Alright, we're gonna go for the steel again, because why not? Now, this Mosin, I don't know why this Mosin in particular, it has the same profile as my 9130s in terms of the hand grip, but there's been several times where I've smacked myself in the face with my own hand with this thing. And I don't know why. I'm holding exactly how I hold on my other Mosin rifles, but there's twice where I bopped myself in the lip with this thing, and I'm just not certain as to why. Now, for all intensive purposes, this right here is just like the 91, the 1891 pattern, with a few minor modifications. I know later on the Finnish actually made some ribs in their bolts. Just right there on the end, you would be able to see them if they were actually there. Right there on the end, two little ribs that would slide into the receiver. Just help stabilize them a little bit better to increase accuracy, theoretically speaking. Now, there are a few little, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, hold on a second. Oh my goodness. The bolt actually matches the receiver. Nice. 49149, 49149. Nice. There's a few little indications that might potentially point me in the right direction. However, my lack of knowledge about these rifles, they do not lead me to come to any real positive determination in terms of outcome. I see an arrow on the actual bolt right here, and since it matches the rifle, that could potentially be an Izhevsk arrow. It looks like an Izhevsk arrow, but it's not in any triangles or circles or anything like that the Izhevsk arsenal was doing, but that might be an Izhevsk arrow. I'm not sure if the Finnish used the same bolts and just re-serialized them or not, but that right there is a strong possibility that this right here is an Izhevsk made 91. But that is the only indication I see. Besides that, we just have a backwards R, two lines, a backwards capital R, a M, two A's, and a D. I don't know what any of that means. You know what? Just for fun, let's go out to a little bit of a distance and I'll make some shots on target. The safeties on these things are just like the other Mosins, nice and stiff, but you just pull the sear itself to the side and lock it in place, and now the sear is held back by the receiver. And now there's no way in hell the gun's gonna fire. Okay, well, now we're back here at about, oh, I'd say about roughly 80 yards approximation. I normally don't use this shooting area. I got a couple of nails on a tree that I just kind of set the camera on. But I normally go back to either the 100-yard mark or I stay up there. And that's where I do most of my range blasting at. I normally don't shoot from this area right here, but I don't have camera B out here, so I want you guys to at least see downrange. So let me take this old girl off safe and put some rounds downrange and see if we hear our steel ring out. I think I hit the steel. It sure as hell sounded like we hit something. Well, obviously we hit something, I guess. Yeah, all right. We are in fact hitting the steel. That's awesome. Man, I tell you what, whew, this 91 is heavy. Way heavier than the 9130s that I'm used to shooting. Like, this thing right here is probably about 4 inches longer of barrel, and my God, I can feel it in my forearm. Who needs a rear sight? Those don't exist. It's a government conspiracy. I insist on it. Alright. Man, that trigger sucks. I'm pretty sure that last one I pulled right. By the looks of it, for the rounds we hit pretty much dead center. Whew, Nelly, now I'm starting to remember why I don't use this area. There's no shade, my goodness, it's hot over here. Let's go back over there where there's shade. Okay, well, I can honestly say I was not expecting to be the owner of a Finnish Mosin Nagant, and I was not expecting to ever get my hands on an 1891 Mosin Nagant. But in this particular case, I guess I just kind of hit two birds with one stone, because that's exactly what I have right here. I'm not disappointed. This is not me saying I'm disappointed. It's just one of those things that I wasn't really expecting to come across. I see plenty of 9130s out there. I see plenty of M24s out there. Not very often that you come across an original 1891 pattern Mosin. It's not very often that you come across one of the Finnish captured 1891. So it's just not one of those things that I ever thought I'd have in my arsenal. Anytime I see them, they are normally on sale for quite a pretty penny. And, you know, for the price of one of these, I could pick myself up like 3 9130s and some ammunition. But this one right here was being sold at an exceptionally good price. And I talked the guy down to even more, so I ended up just deciding to go ahead and get it. Even though there's no rear sight, I could throw one on there, complete with the leaf spring that is required, and I still make out like a freaking bandit on this thing. Anyway, folks, what do you think? I think this thing needs cleaned. It's sticky. It's obviously got some, not necessarily cosmoline. I don't think that this is cosmoline anyway, but it's got some crap on it, basically all over the rifle. I'm going to go ahead and scrub it with some mineral oil or maybe some WD-40, see if I can get it cleaned up any. I don't see any cartouches or markings or anything on the stock. Like, there's very few markings on this rifle. We got Tikakoski, 1943, serial number 49,000 and change, and SA, which is the acceptance mark of the Finnish Army. How about any import markings? What do we have over here? Import marking CIA STAVT. That is what it says. And then underneath, M91 762R, and I can't read the rest. I was a little confused at first while I was trying to take this thing apart. Apparently the barrel bands, you actually tighten them and loosen them in different directions. They're not left-hand thread. It's very strange. What you would normally do to tighten this thing and bring the screw in the direction that you would tighten it, that actually loosens the barrel band because that spreads the barrel band apart so you can pull it off the rifle. Because of this, the previous owner had no idea. about how this actually worked. So they were trying to tighten it, and it remained loose, and I could tell that they had no idea what it is that they were doing, because they actually they took a little wood nail and nailed the actual barrel band into the wood versus tightening it through the screw. They were clearly confused on how it was that it actually worked, and I mean, I could understand. It took me a second to figure it out too, but they obviously did not understand what was mechanically going on here. As you loosen the screw, it pulls this end of the barrel band this way into this end, and it clamps it together, and that is just how this barrel band works. I'm also pretty sure that I know why the rear sight is gone. The rear sight was gone because there was a, what would you call it, a scope mount on this thing. No scope or anything like that, but there was an actual scope mount, a Picatinny rail mount on this rifle. And I'm pretty sure that that was put on this rifle because the rifle was shooting significantly right whenever I'd gotten it. Nothing was really played with, but those Russian sights are not windage adjustable unless you look towards the front sight. But the front sight is not windage adjustable very easily, and if you do not understand basic mechanical functionality, like this person here clearly did not, then he might have just thought that the rifle was shooting right. So he probably just threw a scope on it so he could, you know, adjust the scope because he knew how to adjust scopes. Or maybe he threw a scope on it just to have a scope on a Mosin. But I have my paper target out there, and I was figuring out where it was shooting, and I noticed it was shooting right. So I went ahead and I just took a little punch, and I gently tapped this front sight over to where it was supposed to be, and now we're hitting pretty much right on target where it was that it was supposed to be hitting. But if I had to make just a bare basic assumption, I'd say that is probably why the rear sight is missing on this thing. Huh. I just got a random idea, very random. I was looking at this right here, the actual, what would you call this? I guess the mounting bracket for the Mosin, the leaf sight spring right here, the actual mounting bracket for the leaf sight spring. And I just got the idea to like buy specifically Mosin parts and build myself a Mosin just out of parts. I feel like that'd be a really fun time. Just like a homemade Mosin build. That's just an idea. It's just a random thought. What else was I going to say about this? There was something else. Let's see. I covered why the Finns had it. I covered the Winter War, Continuation War, M39. That's like the finest version of the Mosin. This right here was one of the first versions of the Mosin that the Finnish were working with. Why it was refurbished and converted in the middle of the Continuation War, I'm not 100% positive on. I'm sure somebody down there is going to let me know about that. But it is in exceptional shape, including the bore. This is going to be a dramatically accurate rifle whenever I get it, well, whenever I get sights for it. We do have the two-piece stock on this thing, so that might be some indicators as to the time period around when this thing came into existence. I'll have to do some research on that one. Okay, well, this was a fun little, well, I was going to say little example of Finnish rifles, but this right here is just an example of like the first Finnish rifle. I have to get my hands on some other Finnish Mosin variants. Where do I start? I guess I could talk about them a little bit. The Finnish, much like many other countries, discovered that their rifles were way too long, so they shortened them up. The M39 has like a different barrel band than these. Has a different sight hood. These actually have no sight hood on them whatsoever, not even a slot cut into the barrel so you can install a sight hood. They are specifically intended not to have a sight hood. This was back before sight hoods were really a common thing that militaries adopted for their repeating rifles. But the Finnish shortened the barrels, added a much stronger front barrel, not front barrel band, nose cap, there we go. Sight hood, they vastly improved the sights. They're no longer this, what would you call that? I'm going to call it the sea serpent back. It kind of looks like the back fins of a fish almost. But the stair step looking thing, they converted that over to, you know, your standard just flat sliding leaf sights. I imagine that they probably did a lot of really good work on the triggers, but the trigger on this thing is absolutely awful. Besides that, Just another Mosin. Looking around for any markings still. Alright, let me know what you guys' thoughts are down below, I suppose. Are you alive or are you a part of the tree? There's something moving here. I'm pretty sure that it's a critter, but it's like really blending in with the tree that is right here. So I'm gonna not mess with it because I don't know what it is. That's a very good piece of advice right there. If you don't know what it is, don't mess with it. Anyway, let me know what you guys' comments are down below. I don't foresee me getting any more Finnish Mosins, but I never really thought that I'd get my hands on one anyway. So now I have myself a Finnish 1881/24. And don't get me wrong, it's a very heavy rifle. Back in the day, this right here was cutting edge technology, but nowadays, my goodness, it's the biceps of the people back then must have been absolutely tremendous. I'm just out here struggling to fire off a couple of rounds before I get tired and whatnot. Ah, it's an assassin bug. I just had an assassin bug land on me. That's what that was. This guy right here just fell out of the tree. And these guys have tremendously painful bites. I am very happy he decided not to bite me. But yeah, these are assassin bugs and they're not deadly, but man, do they suck. Gotta love Florida, right? Here, let me go ahead and put this retainer back on my camera here. Perfect. Alright, let me know what you guys' thoughts are down below. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you like the video. That always helps out with the algorithm. Description down below has a link to all sorts of stuff, including an email sign-up list. That's my just in case, just in case something happens to this channel. I'm watching that assassin bug like a freaking hawk right now, making sure it doesn't decide to fly over here again. I got my eye on you now. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'm gonna go make something to eat. I haven't eaten yet today, and it's like pushing 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Thanks for watching, guys. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.